question.
Do you know where all of your money is going? In this video, we're going to talk about why having a budget is so important, whether you make $10,000 or $10 million, and how to budget successfully. I know budgeting can be a boring topic, but bear with me because having a budget can actually be a game changer when it comes to your financial health and well-being. Stay tuned for my absolute favorite budget category that you need in your budget. Let's jump in. Now, before you even start to budget, you should find your why. Let me explain. Most people just think of budgeting as something they should be doing because maybe they want to increase their wealth, but instead, you should dig a little deeper to figure out exactly why you are budgeting. Maybe you want to retire early, or save some money for your kids' college, or maybe you want to save for your dream vacation or a wedding. Whatever it may be, your reason for budgeting should be top of mind, because without a reason for budgeting, you'll be way more likely to fall off the budgeting wagon and revert to old, financially irresponsible habits.
Stop it.
Many people think of budgeting as restrictive and confusing, but budgeting is actually freeing and maybe the key to unlocking your successful financial future. When you think of budgeting, do you think of constantly reducing expenses so that you can save more money? While expense reduction is a component of budgeting, it's not the primary goal. Instead, we should focus on creating a budget that is sustainable long term. For example, if you enjoy something that costs money, you don't necessarily need to cut it out. Instead, you should assess whether each expense is worth the joy that you receive from it, then decide which expenses to keep and which to cut out. Oftentimes, the smaller expenses, like coffee and cheap hobbies, bring people quite a bit of joy, and cutting these out won't necessarily improve your life. Instead, you should usually focus on cutting back on the big three expenses, which are housing, transportation, and food, since people often overspend in these categories. Now, budgeting should be viewed as a tool, not a chore. If you think about successful businesses like Apple or Google, they meticulously track cash inflows, cash outflows, and how much money they have. Similarly, we should be tracking all these metrics. We should be running ourselves like a business. By doing this, you're able to avoid overspending. A lot of people try to guesstimate a budget in their head, which often leads to missing expenses or overestimating income. With a budget, you're forced to be intentional about where your money is going. But people have a lot of negative thoughts about budgeting that stop them from taking action. Maybe you already know that you're spending more money than you're making. Maybe you have a ton of credit card debt that feels insurmountable. Lots of people don't want to see the damage of their spending on paper.
Now that's a lot of damage.
If any of these negative thoughts resonate with you, that's okay. Most people have faced financial trouble in their life. Don't let these thoughts stop you from making progress. Instead, face your own financial reality and then put in the work to improve it. Budgeting allows you to take control of your finances since you'll know, rather than hope, that all of your expenses will be covered. This will greatly reduce financial stress and anxiety. Now, I hope you're convinced that budgeting is worthwhile, so let's talk about how to budget. It's actually pretty simple and doesn't need to be confusing at all. Simply put, budgeting is planning how you're going to spend your money. The first step to start budgeting is to determine your expected income. This includes income from your primary job, income from side hustles, any dividend income, and any other source of income that you have. Income from a normal W-2 job, especially if you're salaried, should be really easy to calculate since it should be roughly the same each month. But other sources of income may be a little bit more irregular, in which case you should estimate on the low end. For example, if you work a commission-based job and your monthly income ranges from $2,000 to $3,000, plan that you'll be making $2,000 per month, since overestimating your income can get you into financial trouble. The next step is to list out all of your expected expenses. Your main expenses will probably be your rent or mortgage payment, groceries, dining, vehicle payment, gas for your vehicle, each of your utility bills, and any other recurring payments like subscription services, insurances, etc. Other random categories include haircuts, gym memberships, and debt payments. Everyone's budget will be unique, but try to make sure you account for all of your expenses when listing them out. Don't worry about listing expenses that are very sporadic, since these will be tracked under a miscellaneous category. Expenses like rent and car payments are easy to estimate since they usually stay the same each month, but expenses that vary, like utility bills, are a bit trickier. Two common approaches include either taking the average of the last 6 to 12 months to get a good idea of what your utility bill expense will be per month, or to plan for the highest amount expected in a month. When in doubt, I usually like to estimate expenses on the higher end, as this is a more conservative approach. Now that you have a good idea of what your income and expenses will be for any given month, it's time to actually create a plan to follow. You could either track your expenses in a spreadsheet, an app, or on old-fashioned paper. There's a ton of good free spreadsheet templates for budgeting, and there are also a lot of free budgeting apps. I prefer the convenience of an app, but some people like the flexibility of a spreadsheet. It's really personal preference. Once you decide between a spreadsheet, an app, or paper, you should create categories for each income source and categories for each expected expense. I generally prefer my categories to be very granular with smaller budgeted amounts rather than having larger categories with larger budgeted amounts. For example, if I had multiple streaming services, say Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime Video, instead of having a single streaming service category, I would have an individual category for each separate service. When making your categories, don't forget to create a category for miscellaneous expenses. This miscellaneous category should catch any random expense that isn't a normal monthly expense, like toothpaste or new socks. However, if you notice that you're putting the same expense in your miscellaneous category for a few months in a row, you should consider creating a separate category for this expense. Now it's time for my absolute favorite budget category. When I was first creating a budget, I wanted budgeting to be a sustainable, long-term habit, not just something that I quit after a few months. I also didn't want budgeting to feel too restrictive. That's why I added this magical category to my budget, which is fun money, or money that I can spend on whatever I want, from candy to hobbies. This should obviously be very low priority on your list of expenses, but I personally think that having a fun money category is essential to long-term sustainable budgeting. Now that you have all your categories set in your budgeting tool, it's time to simply track your spending. I prefer to log expenses as soon as possible after I spend the money, so if I'm at a restaurant, I try to log the purchase in my budgeting app before I leave. But you could also save receipts and log expenses in your budgeting tool, daily, weekly, or even monthly. I find that it's pretty tedious to keep track of receipts, and I don't always receive a receipt for every purchase, which is why I try to log every purchase immediately. In the first few months of budgeting, you may find that you budgeted too much or too little in a category. That's okay. Again, a budget shouldn't feel restrictive, so feel free to adjust your budget within the first few months and continue to tweak it as your life circumstances change. However, don't get in the habit of going over your budgeted amounts, since this defeats the purpose of budgeting in the first place. Ideally, your income should be higher than your expenses. If not, you should work to decrease your expenses and/or increase your income. Keep in mind that you can only decrease your expenses so much, but your income potential is nearly unlimited. If you have any excess money left over, you could work on building your emergency fund, paying off high-interest debt, building savings, or investing. Now, stop saying that you'll start budgeting next month or next year.
Stop it.
And get started today. Comment below what your largest budget category is, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more finance-related videos.